All right. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to switch up how I'm using it. Hopefully this goes a little bit better, more consistently. So welcome again to Back to the Basics series, part 5 of 9. We are going to be going over vendor acknowledgements and vendor invoices. Okay, so as I was saying before, I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about the flow, the workflow, action items, and keeping that in the back of our minds to kind of talk about that. Everybody's workflow is going to be a little bit different just depending on your dealership and your different roles that you have there. But we want to just make sure that you are using action items. Like I said in the last series, last part, you know, if you're not using action items, it's a huge part of the program, huge part of what makes everything flow through very organically. So please reach out to me if you want more information on action items in the interim, because I will be doing a full webinar on that as well. But to relate to this one right now specifically, I tend to suggest sending an action item for review vendor acknowledgements. So this would typically take place after you created the purchase order, right after you sent the purchase orders out to your manufacturers. And what that's going to do for you is just kind of give you a projections report of what to expect to be coming in acknowledgements-wise, and make sure that you're actually getting those acknowledgements that you should be expecting from your manufacturers, so that you can put those ship dates in and track it accordingly. So I'm going to start with an action item just to kind of give you an idea of how that should flow through. So ideally, you just got the acknowledgement via email or however you're receiving it. Hopefully it's email. And you're just reacting to that acknowledgement. So there's no one telling you, you know, we got this acknowledgement in. Typically you're getting it, you know, via email, and you're opening up that acknowledgement. And now we need to know where to go in the system to actually add the acknowledgement. Okay, so at this point, I would go into my actions to perform, and I should have an action item that I more than likely sent to myself if you are someone who does purchase orders and acknowledgements. But, you know, that can be different people as well. So just depending on your structure. So if I open up this action item, again, you know, the beauty of action items are that you can open them up and it'll take you straight to the module that you need to get in. So you can set all those up on the back side. So I open up my action item, just to keep talking about action items, keep it open while you're doing that function asked of you. So you can see here, I opened up an action item that says Hayworth PO 5592-2. Took me straight into 5592 into the acknowledgements and costing module. You need to know how to get there manually, which you will need to at some point, I'm sure. So you just need to go to modules, acknowledgements, costing, underneath that project tab or that job tab. Okay. From there, you're just going to highlight your PO up top. So this is where all your purchase orders will be held. A little bit of information about that purchase order, who the vendor is, when it was created, what order it's connected to. Your layout might look a little bit different than mine. You know, keep in mind, we do have a way to customize these layouts. We will go over that in the future. But if you're wondering why your grid looks different than mine, I might have a different grid layout. I like to put the stuff up front that makes, you know, that I need to look at on a regular basis. What's the most important information to me? Put those columns up front. What's my estimated total? That's what my purchase order total is. At a quick glance, if I had, you know, 15 purchase orders up here, at a quick glance, I could see what has been acknowledged, what has actually been billed, just by looking at these columns in this upper view. You can see this tab right here is purchase orders. Sorry, this tile. This one right down here, you can see it says vendor acknowledgement, and this one is vendor invoices. So all three you're going to see right here in this screen. So this is where you'll do your acknowledgements and your costing, your vendor bills. Okay. So what you'll do is just highlight the PO. You've got your acknowledgement open. You know, if you have dual monitors, you can put your acknowledgement on one screen and this on the other screen. Okay. So if I had, this is just a little test I put together. You know, you can put this on one screen, put your e-manage on the other screen, and have a little split screen there. You also want, you know, as a best practice, you should be uploading this acknowledgement into the project document. Okay, everything that's project related document-wise should be in the project document. It's only as good as what information you're putting in there. But by uploading those, now I can, have that folder file just building of all the different documents that this project relates to. Anyone who wants to go in and access it, history, documents, and we're just building that project file. Okay. So from here, I would just go into Add Acknowledgement. So highlight your PO, hit Add Acknowledgement. From here, I like to enlarge this screen here. So I might hit the maximize and put this on one screen and then put my acknowledgement on the other screen. Since we're just working off one monitor, I'm just going to get rid of this right here since it's just a little dummy acknowledgement. I'm going to enlarge this. I like to enlarge it so that I can see a little bit more information. And again, you can totally change these grids up. If you want to see, price each more up front, you can just grab these and move them around, save your layouts. But from here, I would just enter in the information as it is on my acknowledgement. So what was my acknowledged ship date? We're expecting to ship it. So I'm going to put in a date here. I'm going to ship it around the 6th. Planned delivery date. Some manufacturers give you a planned delivery date, some don't. You can always come back in and modify that. So if they give you a delivery date at a later time, maybe you get a shipping notice with a planned delivery date, you can put that in. There are some manufacturers that acknowledge they do just go off planned delivery date, or they might have both. Either way, if you have that information, plug it in. If you don't, you can come back in and edit it at a later time if you need to. Because, the one that I'm, usually getting from most manufacturers is that acknowledged ship date. And I'm going to go down here and do my acknowledgement number. So I'm just putting it in exactly how it was on my acknowledgement. You can copy and paste in these fields. So if I needed to just copy this number, paste it right in here, I could. Tracking number, if they give you a tracking number, again, you can always come back in and add that later if you get it at a later time. And receive date, I'm going to skip over ship date because you're not going to have that at this time, but receive date, that'll automatically populate once this acknowledgement is actually received in full. You do have a little section for notes as well if you needed to add any notes, parcel received, things like that, any type of notes that you need to add there, you can add those in. It's just a free form field. But most of the time what you're going to be doing is coming down here. The big number, the thing that I'm, taking a quick glance at, is this number, but you do all your checks in this screen right against your acknowledgement. If you're, if this had additional options on it, you'll see a little plus sign over here. You can expand out and check the options. Okay, but otherwise you're going to see your description, your price each, your quantity ordered, how many have been acknowledged to date, how many are balanced, how many you have on balance, and then the extended price. Okay, but so ideally if my acknowledgement came in perfect, everything looks good, my price is the same, everything's been acknowledged exactly as is, you can just come down here and say acknowledge all. So that's in a perfect world, obviously not always the case. So what I'm going to show you some exceptions. Okay, so if I received this one and the acknowledgement came back and it was a partial acknowledgement, under acknowledgement quantity, you'll just put how many you actually are acknowledging. When I hit tab, it's going to put in the estimated price. From there, you can also override it. So if I was acknowledging 4 at the price of, we came in a little lower, $8.85, I put in my acknowledged price there. Come down here to this one, everything looks good. I'm going to highlight both and say acknowledge selected. So it's pretty straightforward. If you're acknowledging at a different quantity, put in your acknowledged quantity difference there. If you have a different price, put it in an acknowledged price. Acknowledge all is to acknowledge all as is. Acknowledge selected is to highlight and acknowledge what you're selecting. So if I was only acknowledging this, I could highlight just this line and acknowledge selected. Pretty straightforward there. So I'm just going to highlight both and hit acknowledge selected. Yes, I'm sure that I want to acknowledge. This should just calculate that new price for you. Acknowledge extended price. So this is now my new extended acknowledgement price. And I can close out. From here, I can always, like I said, come back in, double click on the acknowledgement, make adjustments if necessary, add notes, add tracking number, and save. Now, if I go into add acknowledgement again, since I only acknowledged the top line out of an acknowledged quantity of 4, it shows that I only have 1 left to acknowledge. So that means you can add multiple acknowledgements to one purchase order, which, is sometimes a scenario. So now I have a new acknowledgement number, and I'm acknowledging all as is. Yes. Make a mistake, highlight. You can highlight multiple at a time, delete acknowledgement. Yes. Pretty straightforward. There's going to be some scenarios where you have to close out of this screen and get into it if you need to do a refresh. Sometimes you can just highlight off that line and click back on it. You saw my add acknowledgement button was grayed out. It wouldn't let me add another acknowledgement because it thought they were still in there. Little refreshes like that might be necessary. So I'm just going to redo this one real quick, and you can see how fast it is. If it's a small one, not always are they going to be like this. Acknowledge all. Yes. I'm just going to acknowledge as is. Obviously, for any of my dealers that deal with web services, Hayworth, Herman Miller, my H&I, you're going to go into Hayworth Web Services, batch entry, Hayworth Web Services, download and process documents, download, highlight, process selected. So for any of my dealers that don't deal with web services, you can see how beautiful that would be. If every manufacturer did that, it's just going to pull in exactly what they acknowledge. If there was any discrepancies, it would give you a pop-up and let you know what those discrepancies are. With vendor bills, so I will field questions at the end. If you have questions on acknowledgements, please write them down. If you want to chat them in early, feel free. I will cover those questions at the end of the session. Otherwise, I'm going to just move forward to vendor invoices. Now, I might have some questions. The question I get a lot on vendor acknowledgements is the exception. You got a vendor acknowledgement in with a freight line on it. Okay, and whoever did the quote didn't put a freight line on the bill of materials. It happens, unfortunately. I'm definitely going to have a session on how we should definitely stop that type of margin erosion at the root. We should be using auto freight parts or auto templates to stop that margin erosion. Make sure that we're all thinking about those manufacturers that we know charge freight. But it is going to happen for whatever reason it happened. At this time, at adding acknowledgement, if you catch it at that point, if they did actually acknowledge the freight, you got to go back to the bill of materials and add a freight line, process a purchase order, so reprocess an order entry if you are going to end up charging the client. Remember, order entry equals customer invoices. If nothing changed on the customer order, you can just go straight to create purchase orders and generate that line, that freight line, and then now you have a freight line to acknowledge. I like to, what we're really taking into consideration whenever we talk about freight and adding that on to the project, is it worth going back to the bill of materials, adding it on, reprocessing just to acknowledge it? That's going to be, a change management decision that you guys will have to make internally. I'm going to show you whenever adding an invoice, how easy it is just to add that freight line on manually. And then we're capturing that cost, which is really the end-all goal. We want to see what our actual costs are, and actual costs are coming from vendor bills. Okay, so add invoice. So down in the bottom right corner, add invoice. That's where you'll add your vendor bills, project-related vendor bills, onto the purchase order. So if you're just coming straight into the screen, you just got the bill in, obviously it's not going to happen just like that. You're going to go through some other steps before you get that vendor bill in. So you will have to know how to get in here manually to this job. For a vendor bill, you're usually just reacting. I always say the quick, easy way, for anybody in accounting who's adding vendor bills, love my quick search. That's an F4 if you like your function keys, F4 5592, and enter. Or you can flip this, open this window, straight to acknowledgements and vendor invoices, and it'll take you straight to this screen. If you're someone who's just always, entering or inside this vendor invoices module, you can flip this at the first time that you sign in, and it'll just remember that for as long as you're signed in. When you close out, it will just default back to project information. But I love that quick search there. I will show you batch entry as well for vendor bills in just a moment. So from here, I might have my vendor bill up on the other screen. Again, add that vendor bill into the project document. Okay, on a future session, we are going to do document management. If you don't know how to add documents in eManage, please stay tuned for that one. Okay, we should definitely be attaching all project-related documents to the project. So add invoice, I'm going to just punch in my invoice number as is on the invoice on my other screen. I'm going to put in my invoice date. All of these you can tab through and just key in if you like, just using your keyboard. So I received the bill today. As I tab through these, so tab on my keyboard, you can see it automatically put a due date out at 12/28/2019. Because I have this manufacturer set up as net 30. If your terms of sale are set up correctly with the manufacturer and on the backside in the administrator, it should just automatically default out to the due date. Okay. If you're having to key that in every time, definitely reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction of how or who to talk with at your dealership to make sure that's all set up correctly. You shouldn't have to do that every time. You can override it at this point if you needed to. So if you're trying to get a discount or you need to pay it at a later date, you can definitely override that at any time. So from here, let's say my bill came in at the exact acknowledged cost. I would put in my amount, and then I would hit apply. This is the magic box right here. If you are not entering your bills the way that I'm showing you right now, we definitely need to have a discussion. Everything on the backside should be set up so when I hit this apply button and I hit tab on my keyboard or enter on my keyboard, you should see everything auto-populating in this top area of this window here. So you can see because of how I have everything set up, it automatically knows based off of the product types on this purchase order, and now this acknowledgement against that purchase order, it knows what amount to put to the right account. So this is my general ledger up here. It knows exactly how to split that out. You can see here, we take advantage of the WIP functionality. If you're not using WIP, also something we should probably talk about and see if that's something you do want to start taking advantage of at your dealership. The purpose of WIP is to recognize your income and your revenue and your cost of goods sold at the same time, same period. And that's what WIP is doing. So we're just putting it in a holding place for work in progress, putting that in a holding place. And then whenever we recognize revenue, it's just going to automatically convert from WIP to COGS. We are doing some enhancements here on the WIP and COGS adjustments. So just keep that in the back of your mind there. So what it'll do is just automatically separate it out for you. That magic button, the apply checkbox, is what does that. Now you can hit the plus sign down here and see exactly what's underneath that acknowledgement. So let's say you got a bill in, but maybe they charged you individually, one for the freight and one for the furniture. Okay, so instead of applying it to the total acknowledgement, you would want to hit the plus sign. Let's say this amount was the $133.50. I would come down here and find the apply checkbox on that line only and just click the apply to invoice on that one. Okay, then the next time I have to go add an invoice, it'll only recognize what I have left to add onto an acknowledgement, what I have left to apply. So that's in a perfect world. Everything came in exactly as it should. And then I would just save invoice and close. You see, as I start to add some of this information in, it's going to start putting some information up top, totals up top here. So my vendor bill today, my acknowledgement costs, they're coming in the same, but you can see those discrepancies up here at a quick glance. Now, what I was talking about earlier with, you just got a bill in and it's got a freight line on it. Unexpected charge of any sort, really. And you need to capture that charge there. So what you could do is come in here, same concept, still add all your stuff in, still do your due date, still put your amount in, but maybe it came in at $5,000. I would apply, still same exact thing. It still only applies what it knows to apply to. Okay, not a mind reader, so it doesn't know where to put that leftover $416.50. This is something you always want to keep an eye on here. Amount to post. That's my red flag. If there's something left in this, if this isn't balanced, if this doesn't say 0, then something's not right. I need to figure out where that remaining balance needs to go. Okay, so from here, I could just come over here into the account, choose what account it should go to, either by typing in that number or any part of that account name, or hitting the drop down and selecting it. So maybe it was supposed to go to freight. There was unexpected additional freight. If you're using classes, you will have to apply a class at the time of manually adding. You can also hit this drop down and apply your classes here. This is what we want to see, amount post 0. If you're one of my Canadian clients, you know, you followed all the same exact steps that I just did there. You still hit apply, but the last thing you would do is pick your template, your GST, PST template, and hit apply, and then it'll know where to apply that remaining tax. So you will be seeing an amount to post more times than others, but you want to apply it to that tax template. Okay, let's talk about vendor deposit. So add invoice. I need to pay this vendor 50% to get this order going. Okay, what I would do is same thing. I'd still come into the same screen, hit add invoice. Instead of putting anything over here, you can modify it, but if you did get an actual invoice number from them, otherwise you just need to pay them the 50%. So you need to cut a check for the 50%. What you would do is just come straight down here to this create deposit for percentage, put in your percentage, and just hit that button. It doesn't really look like a button, but it totally is a button. You just hit create deposit for. It actually gives it its own deposit invoice number. So it's always just going to say deposit VP, PO, and then the PO number. But if you did need to change it for, you know, check cutting purposes, you can double click on this and just edit it. But it automatically split out the 50%, and it automatically assigned it to the accounts as it should. If I just double click on that, it just divided that freight width and the furniture width out 50%. From there, now I'm ready to invoice the rest. I would just do add invoice and add the rest in there. Okay. So a couple things to keep in mind under today. There are going to be some reports that might come in helpful from today. The today panel on the far right side, you're going to have a few different ones. We've gone over a few of these already, the POs to be issued to vendor we talked about in the last session. But now we have vendor acknowledgement. It stays in vendor acknowledgement. So if anybody wants to know how all of these reports act, inside our help guide, we have an area inside the analysis reporting section of the help guide. Under today project items, each one of these will tell you exactly how they operate. So you can see under vendor acknowledgements, they come off of this report when product has been received. Talks to you a little bit about how to clean it up if you need to clean it up, and what could maybe keep it from showing on this report. So each one of these will tell you why it stays in a report and when it comes out. So that report, everything, all the vendor acknowledgements will stay in there until it's actually been received in the system. So that's essentially your shipping projections. When product is expected to be arriving. Once it actually arrives and gets received, it comes out of there and falls into received product. Up here, you also see POs not fully acknowledged. Okay, that one will stay in there. POs not fully acknowledged until it's actually been fully acknowledged. So if you only partially acknowledge something, it's going to stay in that report until you've acknowledged the full purchase order. There's a note in here. If you feel a purchase order is inside of this report and it's staying in there and it should not be in there, maybe you don't actually get acknowledgements from that manufacturer, that would be under the vendor record, and you need to uncheck that that vendor sends you acknowledgements. So they all flow through these reports as they should. There's another one, vendor acknowledgements not yet invoiced. So that's showing me everything that I'm expecting an actual vendor bill on. Another great projections report. What are my costs looking like? So that was really it. You know, if you make a mistake, delete invoice. Oh, one other thing, as you are actually adding invoices in, a lot of people don't know about this little button here. But if I start adding some stuff in and I accidentally applied something to the wrong acknowledgement, you can have, remember, you can have multiple acknowledgements. It's only going to show you what has not been fully invoiced yet down here. If you're not seeing something on here, that means that there's not an acknowledgement on this yet. You can add bills without an acknowledgement, but just keep in mind that it's going to stay in POs not fully acknowledged until you clear it out, unless you tell the system that you don't get acknowledgements from that manufacturer. But what I was going to show you guys is this little button right here. Looks like a bunch of little folders. That's like a clear button. If you click that, it should wipe everything out for you. I'm getting an error message, so I don't. If anybody has problems with that, please let me know. But that should wipe everything so that you can then reapply to the correct acknowledgement. This paid on date, that's going to automatically populate as you're sending bills to QuickBooks. So in QuickBooks integration, every time you send bills over, it asks you, do you want to check for paid bills? It's putting a paid on date on your bills. It's just reading from QuickBooks and putting that in there. So you shouldn't have to manually be putting that in. You have a couple checkboxes here, send to QuickBooks, send to QuickBooks. For some reason, you already added that bill into QuickBooks. You know, we don't want any double entry, but we do want everything to match up and balance. You can uncheck this and say that it's already been sent to QuickBooks. Otherwise, that is really it to acknowledgements and vendor invoices. I knew that was going to be kind of a short one, so I'll leave the room open for questions. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but maybe some of your questions might help me remember. It might just be that easy. On vendor deposits, can you enter a flat dollar amount versus a percentage? Good question. Well, you do have to put a percentage in, but then you can adjust the amount. So if I got it close to, say it was 50%, I did create deposit for. You want to let it do its thing with that create deposit for button, but then you can just come in here and override it if you needed to. And that's, you know, that's going to be an exception. Hopefully that's not something you have to do all the time, because you can see it's going to be some manual work. But I can highlight these, hit delete, and then put it to the right amount. But that would be manually applying it. But by clicking that create deposit for button, it is telling it that that is a deposit invoice. That way it's not applying to the acknowledgement and knows what you have left to apply to that acknowledgement. Good question. I have someone asking if you can apply a credit from a vendor on an invoice. You cannot. We don't handle vendor credits in eManage. We do want it to all balance. So what we typically suggest is to add a negative journal cost to the project, and you would just handle your credits or your discounts exactly the way that you would in QuickBooks normally. So however you typically handle those in QuickBooks, you would continue to do that. But what you can do is go to batch entry. Oh, that's what I wanted to go over, batch entry bills. Batch entry journal cost, and you can do a negative journal cost so that your profits look better on this one if you want it to affect the final profit and loss on this project. My paid on date per vendor invoices never enters a date into the system from QuickBooks. My paid on date per vendor. Rena, whenever you go to send your bills over to QuickBooks in QuickBooks integration, let me just show that off actually.
Oh, I pushed the button. It does the whole like line, like it's thinking, and like says there's one vendor invoice that's been paid, but it never will show on any vendor invoices in eManage. I'm not even on. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can. Yep, I can hear you just fine.
And I'm looking at one from February of last year just to look, and I look periodically, but no, never ever pushes a date into there.
So let me try to open this up real quick. And have you ever tried to manually check for the paid bills? Have you pressed that button before?
Manually check?
Yeah, let me show you.
Okay. And I test it, look at it periodically to thinking maybe an update will fix it, but it never.
Have you called that into support?
No, I give up on calling into support. Sorry. I mean, it's not that important, but it'd be nice if it popped into eManage.
Yes, it checks for paid bills.
It's only when I push over to QuickBooks, then it'll say, do you want to check for paid bills? And I say, yes. And then you get that little, like, I'm working thing, and it says, okay, I'm all done. And then nothing ever happens.
Okay, I'll get with support on that and see what they have. You said you haven't called that one into support. I'll see if they have any troubleshooting issues with that one. But if you will, go ahead and check for paid bills manually. So just go into your send project tables and click that button and let me know right away if that does anything.
Do it right now.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and field some more questions, but yeah, that's definitely something support should be able to handle.
Cool. Thanks.
Can you just add freight on a PO and not? Keith, yes, you definitely can. So in view modified purchase orders.
Shit. Sorry.
I'm just gonna. There you go. Mute. Okay, so in the purchase order screen, this is actually a section that I just updated in the help guide, how to manually add a line on in the purchase order screen. You can go new edit item, okay, right here, and add that item on. You just want to be careful there and make sure that you're picking the right product type. What it doesn't do is add a part category. So, and that's in the help guide that I just added in. Look for manually, how to add items on manually to a purchase order. You will want to make sure that this part category is assigned. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems when you come to receive it. Now, freight lines, you don't need to necessarily receive it, like physically receive in the system because it's not furniture. But if anybody else takes this and runs and adds items on manually to a purchase order, make sure if you are going to actually receive it in the system that you do assign a parts category. But yeah, absolutely you can do that. It's not highly suggested just because we strongly push, bill of materials, that's where it's all coming from. So if you're constantly going into the system and adding a freight line on a purchase order or adding a freight line onto your vendor invoice, I would want to find out why that is. Why is everyone forgetting freight so often, and what can I do to help fix that? So yeah, my 2 cents there. Janet, when creating acknowledgements, we can no longer change the line numbering. Will this get corrected? I am not sure about that one. It sounds like that was something you could do before and now you can't. I know that what they were working on is just the numbering throughout the system being exactly the same throughout the entire all the modules. At some point, like the numbering was getting a little bit lacking. I think in this most recent update that's coming out, the line number is no longer going to just start over per phase. It is going to be continuous and will pull from the bill of materials. So everything should match up And I believe that will be out in this next update. If everybody's wondering about the update, I hope some of my Herman Miller dealers and Hayward dealers from Canada are on the phone. We are working really, really hard to just wrap up this year end really, really nicely. And one of the big ones that we're trying to release in this update, which is kind of holding us up a little bit, is getting the vendor bills with Canada tax, that whole issue, worked out in web services. So that should hopefully be out. On top of that, you guys, this will probably be the first that you're hearing of this. You're getting a little preview. We are getting rid of active quotes and current opportunities in this next update. Really exciting stuff. Current opportunities is now going to stay in here until it recognizes that that quote has actually been processed through as an order. So the big thing in opportunities is if you have multiple quotes on one opportunity on one project, it was coming out of the current opportunities and moving to the backlog, and it kind of, you lose focus, you lose track of where it's at in the system. It is going to stay in here if it recognizes a valid, most likely quote that has not been booked yet. So that is another big one that's kind of holding us up, but I believe from what I've heard today, that's getting wrapped up really nicely. Before I field too many more questions, I do want to go ahead and review batch entry. Batch entry, vendor bills project. If you're not using this, great function. If you're just, if you're someone who just enters bills, you know, all in one sitting, and you're not using batch entry, you definitely want to take advantage of this. It's the same exact window that you've seen that I just showed you on add invoice in the acknowledgements module. But what you'll do here, the first step you'll do, instead of going into the project, you'll just choose your purchase order number up here. So I would just start typing 5592. There it is, -2. And everything acts exactly the same way. So you would still enter in all your information, apply, save in new, and then just do the next one. If you do not see one in here, the only reason that you will not see something in this dropdown is one, it's already got a bill fully applied to that acknowledgement, or two, if the order has been completed. So someone has marked that order as complete or canceled. So sometimes you might have to dig a little bit to find out why you're not seeing it in that window. Support hours on Christmas. We released, I don't know off the top of my head. I know that I'm definitely off. Is support open on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day? Christmas Eve, 12 to 7 Eastern. Christmas Day will be fully closed. Please keep chatting in the questions if you have additional questions. A lot of times when I show some of this stuff off and I, go over to this Today tab and I start showing off some of these reports that you guys might not be fully taking advantage of, that might require some cleanup, stuff that's been sitting in there for some time. Some of them are a little bit easier to clean up than others, but if you need some assistance there, just call into support or email support and ask how you would get something out of whichever grid you're trying to get it out of. But you should be definitely using these reports. They're great little projections reports to kind of see where everything's at. Just to kind of give everybody a review, I have shown this off in another webinar, but since we are on the topic of acknowledgements, please don't forget about this new order status tab. Okay, as you start to, and you're probably going to need to redo your grid layout until we release this next update. I think in our next update we'll release our default company grid layout, but as you start to add acknowledgements in, it's going to start populating an overall order status report here. So underneath this order, 29156, I'm going to start seeing these acknowledgements. You can start seeing these acknowledged ship dates, planned delivery dates, if you have that in there. As you start to schedule things, it's going to show you your first scheduled install date, your last scheduled install date, when things were actually received. So at a very quick glance, without having to go through different areas of the program, if you're just looking at, you know, a specific project and needing to know where that project is, this is a great place to do that now. I have a question coming in about the QuickBooks mapping. So let me just show you here. When I go to add invoice, there's a QuickBooks mapping button. If you turn this off, you won't see any acknowledgements down here, and then you can't do the automatic QuickBooks mapping. So you want to make sure that's on. Why yours is turning off, Rena? I've not heard that before. Again, another thing that you probably just want to talk to support about. They would need to know specific, you know, is it one manufacturer that it's always doing? But we would need to find what the problem is based off of what information you give us. I'll have to kind of dig into that one. The only other reason that it might turn off is not realizing that you're unclicking certain things in different areas. You know, this checkbox is here and up top. It's also in some reports. So I believe in the vendor acknowledgements report. It's also in there somewhere. It's in one of these where you might not realize that you're unchecking it. And that might not be the case. There might seriously be something not set up correctly on your end or what have you, but we would need to know some specifics there. Yeah, so just make sure you check that on. Definitely let us know specifics, Rena. Send that into support@emanage1.com and they'll be able to help you there. And the little, I just want to address the comment about giving up on support. Just to reiterate, you know, whoever I have on the phone here, you know, we have a whole new support team. They all have industry experience. They've been in the business. They are eManage users. They're great people to rely on, and they're getting back to people very quickly. I haven't had any complaints on the new staff. So if there's something that's not getting addressed, you know, definitely get me involved and I'll handle it accordingly. But definitely support@emanage1.com, or you can call in and they'll definitely be able to help you out there. Lots of good questions. I'll leave it open for about another 5 minutes. If there's anybody that needs to run, thank you so much for coming. This will be the last webinar of the year. If I don't talk to you guys, happy holidays, but I will be holding the next webinar on the 8th of January, same time, and we'll quickly wrap up this series and start moving on to some more advanced features in the system. But the last couple will be pretty good. You know, document management, grid layouts. I think a lot of people are really going to benefit from that. But the next session will be receiving and scheduling. We'll talk about when you should be completing installations. We'll move on to some more accounting stuff and then wrap it up with document management and reporting and grid functions. All right, I think the questions have kind of slowed down. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly, Stephanie@emanage1.com, or call me if you need to. Definitely prefer email, but I'm here if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, happy holidays. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Again, hope you guys are finding some value in these webinars and look forward to wrapping up the Back to the Basics series with you. So have a good one.